Welcome to the Alcohol Minimalist Podcast. I'm your host, Molly Watts. If you want to change your drinking habits and create a peaceful relationship with alcohol, you're in the right place. This podcast explores the strategies I use to overcome a lifetime of family alcohol abuse, more than 30 years of anxiety and worry about my own drinking, and what felt like an unbreakable daily drinking habit. Becoming an alcohol minimalist means removing excess alcohol from your life so it doesn't remove you from life. It means being able to take alcohol or leave it without feeling deprived. It means to live peacefully, being able to enjoy a glass of wine without feeling guilty and without needing to finish the bottle. With science on our side, we'll shatter your past patterns and eliminate your excuses. Changing your relationship with alcohol is possible. I'm here to help you do it. Let's start now. Well, hello and welcome or welcome back to the Alcohol Minimalist Podcast. With me, your host, Molly Watts, coming to you from, my friends, we will go with a glorious Oregon this week. Last week I said hopeful, and wow, did it deliver. I mean, it was amazing. It's been in the 70s. It's been sunny. It's supposed to start raining again. That's okay. We had a week of glorious weather here for springtime in Oregon. How are you doing? It's April 21st if you are listening to this on the day that it drops. And we are rounding out the end of Alcohol Awareness Month here, April. Have one more episode next week, but last week we talked and you heard a conversation around something really interesting, I think, the use of psilocybin. And today I wanted to share a conversation that, a re-conversation, I guess, or another interview with Katie Lain from Thrive Alcohol Recovery and her work with people using Naltrexone. And so we talk a little bit about, with specificity towards binging and just our shared aligned ideas around using the behavior context mechanisms that we both talk about and using your mind to manage your thoughts around alcohol and why that is still such an important part of her work. Obviously, a big part of what I talk about here on Alcohol Minimalist. I really enjoy talking with Katie every time we have a chance to collaborate and talk together. I will, of course, link everything in the show notes with how you can connect with her. If you have been considering using Naltrexone, you might want to check out Thrive Alcohol Recovery. Here is my latest conversation with Katie Lain. Hey, Katie, welcome back to the Alcohol Minimalist Podcast. It is so great to see you. Great to have you back. And I just was saying to you before we pushed record, it's been a hot minute since you've been here. So bring us up to speed on what's been happening with you and with Thrive Alcohol Recovery.
Yeah, I'm really happy to be back with you. I hear great things about your podcast. A lot of our Thrive members listen to it. So very glad to be here. I think it's been like 3 years or more since we last spoke. So
right?
I know we're in touch.
Well, I know we're in touch more, and I've shared your content during my summer content series. So I feel like you've been here more often, but in reality, you haven't. So 3 years is a minute. So let's bring everybody up to speed on kind of who you are, what Thrive does, and I mean, even where you've been and what you've been doing in the last 3 years.
Yeah. So hello, everybody. My name is Katie Lain. I am, long story short, someone who struggled with alcohol use disorder for nearly 10 years until I got free using a neuroscience treatment called the Sinclair Method, which uses the medication Naltrexone. And that treatment was just honestly so life-changing for me that within the first month of being on the protocol, I just felt this very strong pull to make YouTube videos, to start talking about it. Like, hey guys, this is a treatment, that really, really works. And, it was like finding a needle in a haystack for me. It's not something that people know about. Even now, many years later, I started it in 2017. More traction is gaining, but it's still wildly unknown, even though it's been around for 30 years. So yeah, I struggled with my drinking for nearly 10 years, typical kind of trying to moderate, trying to quit, being convinced I was going to quit this time, and then I would make it a couple days, weeks, or months, and eventually would return to drinking again. And was just caught in this vicious cycle I didn't know how to get out of. And it just seemed like my drinking was getting worse. I was a daily binge drinker. And then when I learned about this treatment, we'll talk more about it, but it's not a treatment that requires abstinence. It's actually started while someone is still drinking, which to me was like such a relief because I tried abstinence and it hadn't worked, and I wasn't sure if I wanted to be sober forever. So I went on this protocol. We can talk more about how it
Yeah.
works. And I was just blown away. In the first week of the treatment, I knew something was different. I could just see that I was relating to alcohol differently, thinking about alcohol differently, drinking a little bit less, still drinking quite a bit, but drinking a little bit less. And I just felt, honestly, hope for the first time. So doing the treatment, again, started making videos online, and it led me to coaching people, and now running Thrive Alcohol Recovery, which is my organization, where we have a private online program centered around this treatment, where we really guide people through the protocol with lots of support and resources and information and guidance and coaching, things like that.
Awesome. You said something in there that I think is really important. You talked about when you started the protocol and taking naltrexone, that you started thinking about alcohol differently, like right from the get-go. And I know some of the people that I have worked with that also have then either taken naltrexone before or end up working with you and taking naltrexone. What they've said is that drug actually supported and gave them the mental space to be able to do the thought work that I talk about all the time. And that's kind of where you and I tend to align really closely, is understanding that the drug in and of itself isn't going to do everything for you. You still have to work on changing your belief system around alcohol. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, 100%. And that's like, we'll dive into this a bit, but that's where people struggle with the treatment when they assume, oh, and I honestly assumed that. I was like, oh, great, this medication is going to help me drink less. I had that mindset the first kind of few months going into it. And I did see some progress and results, but I hit this plateau and this point where I could see that I didn't really want to drink, some days, like I
Yeah.
wasn't craving because of what the naltrexone was doing, but I was like drinking anyway out of habit or compulsion or to numb and things like that. And so exactly what you said, it gives you this mental space. Like a lot of us, we're just thinking about drinking all the time, that like there's no room to even like question it. Maybe we're white knuckling it, we're saying, no, I shouldn't, but that desire is there. And that's just one of the symptoms of alcohol use disorder. There's constant mental preoccupation with drinking. So with naltrexone on board, over time, it gradually chips away at that. And I just remember one day in particular, it was like 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And I was like, oh my gosh, I didn't think about drinking yet today. And I was someone who would start thinking about my evening drinking at like 11 a.m. Like, oh, I can't wait. Do I have wine at home? Do I need to go to the store? So it does that gradually over time, but you're absolutely right. We call it meeting the medication halfway. Like naltrexone is powerful. It changed my life, but there's more to it than just like popping a pill. Of course, most people recognize that, but it's different to kind of
Well,
walk through it
I
and
don't
be
know.
like,
I mean, you say most people recognize that. I think most people think, oh, good, there's a pill that's going to like
yeah.
make this go away, right? Like, I think that's what they want. So and something else that you just said, and you mentioned it, you said it a couple of times, and I think that's so important, is over time, right? So I think that, again, something that we get tricked into believing is that it's going to be quick and that's going to be automatic and that it's going to happen really fast and it's going to happen faster. I know in the Thrive, you guys, would you say that, is there an average for people, or do you think that the people that get the best results typically stick with it for maybe how long? 6 months, a year?
Yeah, the average we see is about 9 months to a year. And
9 months to
so
a year. Okay.
that means like to get to the place where someone has complete control again over alcohol. Maybe they're still drinking, but they're drinking like totally moderately. They spend most of their time not drinking. They're not craving alcohol
Mostly
anymore.
alcohol free is what I like to call it around here. And
Yeah,
mostly alcohol
exactly.
free.
Exactly. So it takes about a year for most people to get to that place. Now, that doesn't mean they're not going to see really awesome, encouraging changes along the way. I often equate it to like a weight loss journey where it's like best if
Right.
you're losing like a pound a week and it feels like nothing's happening. But over time, you're changing your eating habits and lifestyle, and you see these really incredible changes that add up over time. So we say give it a year. Some people, the fastest I've seen someone get to that place of like freedom is 3 months. Typically, those are people who have kind of done a lot of the work, and naltrexone is just like the missing piece. Like they're already maybe listening to your podcast, reading your book, doing that type of work, and this is just the thing that was missing. Other people who haven't really done that work, or who have maybe gone in and out of AA and just tried abstinence and white knuckling only, it can take longer. Some people it takes more than a year, but oftentimes they reduce their drinking so significantly that like something has changed. They're just kind of working on the last 10 pounds, so to speak.
Right.
And what I see also happen, which is something to be aware of, is sometimes people start on the medication not understanding that it happens over time, to your point, thinking it's a quick fix. And I get messages all the time. Oh, I was on it for a month and I was still drinking too much, so I stopped taking it. And like,
Mhm.
that's the thing I want to avoid, or just so people know, like, have those proper
Right.
expectations, because then what happens is years go by, they learn about what the treatment actually looks like, and then they get on the medication and, see it through to, the end of what's expected. So people may not be aware, their doctor may not be aware. I've heard people say, oh, my doctor prescribed it, but they would only give me 3 months. They won't give me any more after that, like 3 months worth of medication. I'm like, that makes no sense, because the longer you're on it, for most people, the better it works. So yeah.
Right. Okay. I love that. And again, I like the people hearing this message, not a quick fix and requires the thought work. So all of this is kind of what you and I, again, talk about, and that aligns so well. I want to ask you specifically because you categorize yourself as somebody who was a daily binge drinker. So I typically tell myself, or I call myself a daily habit drinker. By definition, it often was a binge if you want to go by the strict NIAAA, definitions. I never looked at it that way because I wasn't drinking like in a quick amount of time. I wasn't drinking trying to get blackout, blacking out, things like that. But I feel more in my comfort zone when I'm talking to people who have that kind of daily pattern where they're drinking at, just like you said, like they're coming home from work and they're drinking after work, and they might drink more on the weekends and and on vacations, but typically it's a daily pattern, and they have a really hard time imagining life without that daily habit in their life. And I totally get that because that's who I was. Binging was not something, or drinking to excess and getting really altered, getting blacking out, things like that was not something that I had a lot of experience with, maybe when I was younger, but not by the time that I started to work on my relationship with alcohol. That was not common for me. So, can you talk to me about your experience with people who maybe have that kind of pattern where they are mostly alcohol free during the week, and then they maybe, if they do include alcohol, they go overboard, and how naltrexone helps them?
Yeah. And sometimes people ask, like, will it help that type of drinking? Or I only
Yeah.
drink once a week or once a month, or and to be honest, I've seen it work for all types of drinkers, from mild to severe AUD. I haven't seen it work for 100% of people that I've worked with. It doesn't work for everyone. So sometimes
Yeah.
people like criticize me, oh, this treatment's not going to work for everyone. I'm like, if you look at the research, it has a clinically proven 78% success rate. So we're not ever saying it's going to work for 100% of people. And honestly, I think one of the big things, just as like a side note, as to why it doesn't work for some people, has to do with like your work that you do, the thought work, the
Right.
mindset, the beliefs they have about alcohol, whether or not they're really ready to change. But to your question around binge drinkers, there's kind of pros and cons for both types of drinkers. If you're a daily drinker, there's pros and cons of doing TSM, and maybe some challenges you'll have that binge drinkers won't have, and vice versa. Typically, what the advantage binge drinkers have who use naltrexone is they already have alcohol-free days. And I'm talking about binge drinkers, like you said,
Yeah.
like they're not drinking every day, but when they drink, they binge. Now, I was a daily binge drinker, so I was drinking every day, and I was drinking like a couple bottles of wine every day, so quite a bit, getting blackout drunk. But with binge drinkers who have alcohol-free days, that's the advantage that they have over daily drinkers, where they already have days where they're not drinking, they're going to the gym, they have healthy coping skills, they have hobbies that they do outside of life. Because for those of us who are daily drinkers, as you well know, it's such an ingrained habit and it touches so many areas of our lives that we've almost got to redefine our whole identity as we decide to drink less through naltrexone or whatever method we're using. So with binge drinkers, they have that advantage because, they already have these other hobbies or skills in their toolbox that they can lean on, on their alcohol-free days. So sometimes, and I don't think this happens all the time, but sometimes it does seem that binge drinkers respond even better to naltrexone than daily drinkers. Now, the one thing I've really learned over the years, my medical advisor, Dr. Volpicelli, he's like one of the world's experts on naltrexone. He was responsible for getting it approved for alcohol back in the 90s. So he's kind of taught me a lot about who the medication works optimally for. And if someone is a binge drinker or a daily drinker, to drink for reasons of like coping, so they want to numb, they're going through a trauma, a tragic event, when they drink on naltrexone for those reasons, they're still getting the benefits they're seeking from the alcohol. Naltrexone really works well for like reward-based drinkers, like those of us who drink for the buzz, to have fun, to feel good, celebrate, all of that. But if someone's drinking to kind of numb, naltrexone's not blunting or blocking the sedating effects of alcohol. So someone can still get those benefits of like the numbing effects, or if they're using alcohol to sleep or something like that. So not to say it doesn't work for that type of drinker, but oftentimes there's more work to be done on building new coping skills and things like that. So one other thing I'll say also, sorry, I'm kind of bouncing back and forth, but to go back to binge drinkers, sometimes when working with people, like if we have clients that are drinking just one day a week, for example, and they binge, the challenge with binge drinkers on TSM is sometimes that like they'll tell me, I don't really think about drinking during the week, or it's not an issue for me to be alcohol free during the week, but that Friday night, like I just binge and I go at it, and the challenge with them sometimes is that urge or that craving or that trigger to drink just kind of comes on like that. And with the Sinclair method, we have to be mindful about our drinking enough to where we're planning to take naltrexone at least an hour before our drinking session, so we can block blunt block the effects of the alcohol. Now, just to clarify for those who've never heard of this before, it doesn't mean you can't get drunk. It doesn't mean drinking is a terrible experience. It just mutes the experience a bit and makes it a little bit less euphoric, less rewarding. We can still get drunk and all of that. So with binge drinkers, sometimes they struggle with compliance because the urge just comes on so suddenly and they're not, in the practice of waiting for that drinking session. They just do it. Sometimes they also can drink through the medication because they're used to drinking so much so quickly. Like I had a client recently, they go to the bar, they were in Spain, they go to the bar, they party, they take shots with their friends. And even if you're on naltrexone and you're taking shots of alcohol, it can kind of overpower the effects of it, meaning like naltrexone is still working neurobiologically in the brain, but you're kind of overpowering the effects to where you're not noticing the off switch it's intended to give. So, people can still what we call outdrink the medicine. So that's another challenge with binge drinkers. One thing we sometimes advise for binge drinkers, if they're only drinking like once a week or something, sometimes we'll encourage them to drink more than that, have more planned drinking sessions where they're really viewing this as a treatment protocol and saying like, okay, I'm going to like start to teach myself to be more of a normal drinker. And so I'm going to drink 2 to 3 days this week, really mindfully, really log my drinks, probably have beers, not shots of alcohol and things like that. So it does absolutely work for binge drinkers. In fact, sometimes I think it works even better. But there are challenges with the compliance piece and also drinking through the medication as well.
Yeah. And I think that there's something that I hear from that I want to get your thoughts on this, because I do believe this about the thought system around binge drinkers, especially those drinkers, just kind of like what you were mentioning, like people that have a pretty good, solid routine outside of the weekend. Like they're going to the gym, they've got their coping strategies, they've got habits. The weekend is, their only time to let off steam, quote unquote, right? So they've got a mindset that is sort of like, it's not that bad because I am super, uber successful and responsible 6 days out of the week. It's just this, or 5 days out of the week. So they talk themselves into the story behind them for their thoughts, and their belief system is it's not that bad. And when we are continually telling ourselves it's not that bad, it's not really a big deal, it's not really a huge problem, it's not really an issue, then of course compliance with any protocol is going to suffer, because we are literally creating the feelings of like, either defiance or rebellion, or kind of like, I don't have to. And would you agree with that?
100%. I'm so glad you're bringing that up, because again, it just speaks to this being more than just a medicine. And even with daily drinkers, what I'll see happen is they'll get on naltrexone, their drinking will reduce 30 to 50%. They're still drinking too much, but they kind of coast for a while because they're like, yeah, it's not that bad. There's not that many consequences from my drinking. And I really feel like it's a personal choice. Like, you or I are not going to motivate someone to cut down on their drinking. They've really got to do that for themselves. But I think what you're saying, like, that's something that can get overlooked, I think, in alcohol reduction or alcohol treatment in general, and including with naltrexone, is just those unconscious beliefs that are operating under the surface that are driving our behavior and almost sabotaging the success that we want, or that we say we want for ourselves. And what I've seen with people is oftentimes those are unconscious and they're not even aware that they're playing out. And so, for example, someone will take naltrexone and think they're doing the protocol correctly, but then they're like sabotaging their own success because they believe it's not that bad. Or to your point, like, they believe that, they still have alcohol on a pedestal, and they're like, this is the only thing that makes me feel good. It's my one reward, my one escape. And
Right.
part of this process is learning and teaching ourselves other rewards and other pleasures. And just to be honest, I remember when I was going through this on my own TSM journey as a daily drinker, I was like trying to take a bath or get a massage or go for a walk. And it just was like, this isn't hitting the same as alcohol.
Right.
Like, this isn't, doing it the same. But over time, my brain learned to prefer those pleasures because they were actually rewarding and nourishing and relaxing. But there was like a transition where I was like, I missed the alcohol. Like, I didn't, and that's the thing with naltrexone, like, it takes away the desire to drink. So it kind of forces you to do other things because you don't really want to drink as much. But there is this transition period. And I think a lot of people still struggle with that, where, alcohol is flooding our brain with superficial reward. And so even if you get an amazing massage, it's going to pale in comparison to that reward from the alcohol. But the beauty with naltrexone is it dampens that reward. So your brain starts to learn that, yeah, it's not as rewarding as it once was.
Yeah. Well, again, and coming back to that, all the thought work that goes into this, folks, and those unconscious beliefs, I call them the ACBs, the alcohol core beliefs, these unconscious stories that we have around alcohol that drive our behavior, and we're really not aware of it. And that's why this month, it's April, it's Alcohol Awareness Month. And so this was an important conversation to have during this month, because I think this, it's just, this is another resource for people, whether you do, my program, whether you do Katie's program. We want to start addressing and looking at our relationship with alcohol before, hopefully, it becomes problematic. And so, do you find that the people that are reaching, I know that you specifically, because it's in the name, Thrive Recovery, it tends to lend itself more, or it sounds to me like more, for people that are either seeking an alternative to AA, they're in active recovery, they may already be self-identifying as, or have somebody told them that they have severe alcohol use disorder. Talk to me about that. Where the line is naltrexone only for people that are truly problematic drinkers, or do you see benefit for people who are just working on their relationship with alcohol and could use that extra, that extra bump?
Yeah, that's a good question, Molly. I think so. Honestly, I have seen it work for all cases, from mild, moderate to severe. Kind of to your point, when someone doesn't have an extreme case of alcohol use disorder, sometimes they'll get going on the Sinclair method and take the medication, do that part, but not really do much else. And oftentimes they're very self-aware. They're like, yeah, I'm not doing the habit work or the mindset work or the mindful drinking work that is really necessary to change my drinking. And I mean, there's a lot underneath that, there's a lot of fears, we don't even know who we are without this current relationship with alcohol. But I've seen it work for all cases. I will say if someone has severe alcohol use disorder and they are physically dependent and experiencing withdrawal when they're not drinking, those individuals, and Dr. Volpicelli, my medical advisor, this is also something he's kind of taught me, they can still respond to naltrexone and TSM, but oftentimes they struggle with compliance. They're also physically dependent. So they're getting, again, even with naltrexone on board, they're getting the benefits of alcohol kind of calming with the withdrawal effects. And so they can still drink too much. So what he sometimes recommends for people is that they do a detox first and then do the Sinclair method. And I know, or go on naltrexone, and that might sound crazy, like, well, you're detox, you're sober, why not just stay sober? And of course, that's like the logical way to approach alcohol addiction, which if you look at data, it's estimated that 80% or more of people relapse again after quitting because the brain has changed. It's addicted to alcohol. Part of David Sinclair's research is the alcohol deprivation effect, where you quit drinking, but your craving for it actually increases because you're deprived of the endorphin reward you were getting from the alcohol. So all this to say, some people will detox first and then go on naltrexone and the Sinclair method to reach the end goal of this treatment, which is pharmacological extinction of the addiction. When that happens, there's no more craving for alcohol. They may still drink, but they have control. Some people just, they quit drinking because the urge to drink just isn't there. I have an interview on my YouTube channel of a gentleman who was like literally on death's door, and he did that exact protocol, detox, did TSM, and was extinct in 3 months, which again, like you would look at, oh, he's a severe case of alcohol addiction. It's going to take a really long time. But him, it was 3 months. He was very, very motivated and had done the detox first. So all this to say, it can work for all types of drinkers. Like I think a lot of the people in our program, they're successful everyday people. Some of them are heading into retirement. Some of them are already retired. Some of them are moms working. Like it doesn't discriminate, as you know. And I've seen it work across the board. Where I see it, again, not work well has a lot to do with the work you're doing. Like maybe they're just not ready to change. I recently had a member tell me, like, I love drinking. Like, I don't want to go for a walk after work. I want to drink a bottle of wine. And I loved that honesty. I was like, that's where you are right now. And that's okay. And how can we get you to the place where, you have more of a readiness to change? So I think if someone is honestly really motivated to make this change and they're willing to be compliant with the protocol and do the work over time that helps them redefine their relationship with alcohol, odds are the treatment will work for them. It doesn't work for everybody, but I think that those are the things that really impact the results people have. And again, it's what I love about the Sinclair method is it's done over time. So it's this gradual process. It's not like you're changing things overnight. You can gradually drink less, gradually change habits, gradually build new coping skills. And so it's a very gentle process that kind of allows you to naturally change this habit over time.
Right. Which is exactly, again, why our programs align so well, because that is exactly how I start. I'm all about small steps. We meet ourselves where we're at. We make a doable drink plan. But the part that's important about that, and what I loved what you said there, is actually planning ahead and deciding, making those decisions from our logical mind and our prefrontal cortex as opposed to in the moment, which is, again, what naltrexone can help support, is taking that in the moment, impulsive desire, reward center decision around alcohol and allowing us to make a doable plan and stick to those doable plans, be ready to make small steps over time and be willing to let it take time to work for you. Either one, your method, my method, the same, again, they're based in the same kind of protocol, just mine doesn't have medication, which is why I refer people to Katie when they are looking for that option. Just a quick break to talk with you more about Sunnyside. Did you know that Sunnyside uses science to help you reach your goals by focusing on 3 scientifically proven superpowers that you have? Number 1, the power of pre-commitment. Each week, you set an intention for the week ahead that includes a tracking goal, a drink goal, and possibly a dry day goal. Number 2, the power of conscious interference. You'll learn the habit of tracking each day as soon as you finish it, which creates a mindful pause before you start the next day. And number 3, positivity. We know that this is a big step that can be tough at times, right? And that's why Sunnyside offers coaching through SMS and email to give you support, advice, and motivation. You can check out a free 15-day trial at www.sunnyside.co/Molly. That's www.sunnyside.co/Molly. I know for me with people, what I find is they do this work, they start to build some success, they start to have, they're making plans, they're sticking to their plans, they're like, okay, this is going great. And then we have an off-plan drinking night, right? And something goes awry. And suddenly it's like, well, heck, this isn't working. So talk to me about that experience when someone is using naltrexone. Does that, I'm sure, yes, I know it does, because just like you said, people will drink over the medication, people will rely too heavily on it without doing the thought work. But talk to me your perspective on that kind of like, oh, shoot, and not anticipating those struggles.
Yeah, that's a really good question. And that's, I think, what goes back to having proper expectations with this treatment as well, because not everyone expects that. And what happens for a lot of people on this treatment is they get started on the medicine. Naltrexone almost feels like this magic pill where they're like, wow, I don't want to drink anymore and I'm totally in control. And then we call that the honeymoon phase. And then the body kind of adjusts to what naltrexone is doing. Not that it builds a tolerance, it just knows what to expect when the medication is on board. So then the drinking typically increases and people start to panic at that point. Maybe they're drinking through it. Maybe they're drinking, a lot more than they were. Maybe their drinking goes back up to where it was before the treatment. That's really normal. And I've seen people not understand that and they just assumed naltrexone stopped working. And so they stopped taking it, but it's actually kind of par for the course. Those types of mistakes where you drink too much or you skip naltrexone or you drink on an empty stomach and you get really drunk and blackout, it's probably guaranteed to happen to everyone on this treatment at least one time. Like, we are teaching ourselves a whole different way to relate with alcohol, and mistakes are part of this process. And I think for those of us in the mentality of alcohol use disorder, our automatic response is just to beat ourselves up, shame ourselves, feel really bad. But in Thrive, we definitely take a different approach where we try to encourage people, and maybe you do this as well, to really reframe it and see what they can learn from it. Because it's those moments that teach us so much, like about our drinking, our relationship with alcohol, what went wrong, what went right. And we can take that information with us the next time. I will say, like I kind of mentioned earlier, if someone has taken naltrexone and they drink too much, naltrexone is still doing its job to blunt the euphoric or the rewarding endorphins from the alcohol. So that's still working. It's just the behavioral side overpowered it. Just like how our stomach, when we're eating, it's signaling that we're full, but we just kept eating anyway to kind of numb some emotions or because we're bored or whatever. The signal in the stomach is still working. We're just not listening to it. And so mistakes like that are part of this process, and it happens to everyone. I don't think I've ever worked with someone that didn't happen to. And we just encourage people to think back. There's almost always like at least one thing they can pinpoint as to why they drink too much. They had a bad day, they drink on an empty stomach, old habits, maybe they didn't comply completely with the protocol. So just trying to understand what you can learn from it, trying to be kind to ourselves. That's something we're also really big on in our program. Again, like interrupting those negative thoughts where we're just beating ourselves up and trying to talk to ourselves kindly, because it's so stressful when we're beating ourselves up and it just makes us want to drink even more, I think. So having that expectation that this journey is going to be up and down. For most people, it's not a quick fix. There are days or weeks it feels amazing and days or weeks where it feels like it's failing. Recognizing that there's so many things that trigger us to drink, like in my case, for example, I was on naltrexone and I used to drink like at home alone all the time. That was like my favorite way to drink. And after a few months on the medicine, I just didn't want to drink in that setting as much. I could effortlessly moderate in that setting. But then when I would go out with friends, I would overdrink. And so it would show me like, oh, I need more practice in this area of drinking mindfully, thoughtfully, drinking on naltrexone. So understanding that, different seasons, different environments, different holidays, different emotions trigger us differently to drink. And you might be succeeding in one area, but then, another area comes up where you still need to work on that a bit more.
Yeah. And I say compassion and curiosity, right? We want to
I
look at
love
ourselves.
that.
Yeah. I'm always just, we use compassion, we use curiosity being key, because we got to figure out what it is that, how we went, what happened, and doing that in a really objective way, as opposed to those kind of subjective negative thoughts that we're prone to around our behavior, but really getting specific with ourselves and seeing, because just like you mentioned, there are behavioral triggers, there are physiological triggers, there are psychological triggers, there are all these things that are wrapped around our relationship with alcohol and or food or anything else that we may have use as a coping strategy. And it's super important to be willing to do the work to understand that, if we really want to create sustainable change, in my opinion, for the rest of our lives. And I think that is what I heard you kind of saying without saying these words, but I say them all the time, is we just have to keep going. We've got to be willing to keep going. One of the things that I really don't like about AA, there's a few things I don't like about AA. If I'm serious, if I'm honest, everybody knows that. Lots of things that I do like. So don't get me wrong. Like I'm not here to bash AA, but one of the things that I don't like is having to go back to day one, right? That whole mindset is just so counterintuitive to me, and so wrong in terms of, if you really accept that struggle is a part of the process, if you really accept that off-plan drinking is going to happen, and if you really accept that it's just a part of learning and I am going to see it as such, then it's just, we don't want to beat ourselves up. And I think that is the way that I will ask us. We'll start to wrap this up, but you've mentioned it a few times. I know we understand because we hear it so often from people, but there is no scenario where beating ourselves into submission and talking ourselves in a negative, shame-based way is actually going to create a peaceful relationship with alcohol, which is what I talk about all the time, or just get us to where we want to be with how we're including alcohol in our lives, whether that's not drinking at all, drinking in a very, in a moderate way, in a mindful way, in a minimalist way. Do you agree that that is just not something that works for people?
Yeah, I 100% agree. And I think that, I know for me, when I had alcohol use disorder, it was a very self-destructive habit I had for a very long time. And if I'm honest, I really didn't like myself when I got on TSM, and I used alcohol as a way to kind of abuse myself. I think it had to do with past traumas and ways I saw myself, and just, being in the mentality of a daily heavy drinker for 10 years, it really chips away at your confidence and self-worth and how you see yourself and all of that. And so for me, it was like automatic, like you're talking about, to just beat myself up immediately, thinking that that was like effective. Like, oh, if I'm just really hard on myself, then I'll change. But I'm really interested in like our nervous system and how important it is for it to be relaxed and not in like fight or flight and stressed. And if we are hard on ourselves in that way, it just stresses us out. And of course, that's going to be a trigger to want to drink. Or in my case, I just wanted to like numb. Like alcohol was my cozy comfort blanket. And I just wanted to drink as much of it as quickly as possible just to like numb out, because I hated the way I felt. And so part of this process is learning to be kind to ourselves and talk kindly to ourselves. And I'm definitely not perfect at this now, but for me, what was helpful is I imagined I was my sister or my mom, because I lacked so much respect for myself that I couldn't even be nice to me. I was like, okay, what if it was my sister doing this mistake right now? How would I talk to her, or my mom? And that helped me be more kind, because I was like able to put that feeling like on another person. And that's how I started to learn how to talk more kindly to myself rather than beat myself up for mistakes. And I honestly think that's crucial to the journey to get out of that self-sabotaging mindset. Because it's if you conquer it with alcohol and you haven't healed that yet, it's going to come up with other things, other addictions or compulsive behaviors or sabotaging behaviors. So yeah, it's part of this process, and it takes time. First, we have to become aware of it, that it's even happening. We're so used to it, it just happens automatically. But yeah, it's really important work that has to be done alongside the treatment.
Yeah. I say I right now, and I love the fact that you said I'm not perfect at it yet. I don't think I'm definitely not perfect at it either, but I am very aware of it now. And what I didn't really understand before I started doing all this work was how how thoughts in our brain are just they're sentences, but they are both descriptive and prescriptive for the brain. So when we're constantly like using sentences like, oh, I give an example often, or I've used it on the show before, where like when I've lost my car keys, and the first thought that'll come, and I'm in a hurry, right? And I'm trying to get out the door and I can't find my car keys. And like my first sentence in my brain is like, oh, Molly, you idiot. Like that's how my brain, like that's what over time, I've heard that sentence so many times, right? Like that's how I talk to myself. And I literally now, like if my brain starts to say that, I will literally like stop and say, no, hold on, wait, we don't talk to ourselves like that anymore. Like that is not okay. You just you're a normal human who has misplaced your car keys, and that's okay. Like I literally stop myself in that moment because I think it's that important that we start recognizing negative self-talk, and whether it's around, like I said, whether it's around, and that's just a silly example to some degree, but I think that it's also representative of how common negative self-talk is and how we often let it go unchallenged.
It's so true. And I think one of the cool things is you can talk back to that voice as if it's like somebody like being mean to you, like, excuse me, you don't talk to me that way. And it sounds silly, but honestly, it's really effective. Like to notice how you calm down, how you feel more empowered when you respond, and you're not just like letting that voice dominate in your mind. Because just like we have behavioral habits, as you know, we have these thought habits, and a lot of them are unconscious, but they're driving our life. And we're like, why are we living this way? And it's like, well, what's going on in your head all of the time? Yeah, it's so important to do that work as part of this process.
Well, Katie, you and I could probably talk for hours about all of this because honestly, I just like you, when you say, finding naltrexone and finding the Sinclair method, it changed your life. I mean, for me, finding this work around changing how I thought and therefore changing how I felt and therefore changing how I acted in the ways that I, was capable of changing how and really changing my desire to drink, right? That was what my mantra kind of was as I was working on all of this for myself. It was, I'm learning to become someone who desires alcohol less. And I really believe that. And I believe that whether you're using, whether you choose to go and use naltrexone, it's learning how to become someone who desires alcohol less that changes and opens up the rest of your life.
Yeah, it's so true. And I love that you said learning, because it is this process of learning and testing and rediscovering who am I with this different relationship with alcohol. And that's a lot of deep inner work that takes time, and it's scary and uncomfortable. But I think one of the beautiful things is that like the brain loves to learn. And if we just feed it the right information, it will learn. So I commend you for the work you're doing. I think that it is vital, for people on naltrexone or not, but, just in my specialty, like I've been coaching people since 2018, and without doing that type of awareness work, mindfulness work, questioning thoughts and things, like people stay stuck on naltrexone. So, yeah, it's so incredibly important.
Well, it's so great to see you. Great to have you here. Great to have you back on the show. And folks, I will link everything in the show note where you can connect and learn more from Katie. But Katie, give it a shout out.
Yeah, thank you so much, Molly. I run Thrive Alcohol Recovery. You can visit thrivealcoholrecovery.com. We have a private online program centered around Naltrexone and the Sinclair Method. I also have several social media accounts: TikTok, YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, all of that. Put out a lot of videos and content regularly, answering people's questions, sharing tips and information about this treatment. So yeah, reach out if we can help.
Perfect. I will link that in the show notes, folks. Katie Lain, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks, Molly.
Thanks for listening to the Alcohol Minimalist Podcast. Take something you learned from this week's episode and put it into action. Changing your drinking habits and creating a peaceful relationship with alcohol is 100% possible. You can stop worrying, stop feeling guilty about overdrinking, and become someone who desires alcohol less. I work with people in 2 different ways, and you can learn about them over at my website. Go to www.mollywatts.com/workwithme, or reach out to me directly. Shoot me an email, molly@mollywatts.com. We'll jump on a call and decide what might work best for you. This podcast is really just the beginning of our conversation. Let's keep it going. If there's one thing I know, it's that change is way easier when you stop trying to do it alone.